So folks, I wanted to chuck in one last little tutorial for this cycle, and I wanted it to be something super calming that you can do at home. I know our stress levels are quite high at the moment. There's a lot going on, there's a lot to process. So I thought, let's just do something super simple at the end of this tutorial, something everyone can do. So we're thinking about negative space, aren't we? And we're thinking about sort of the white blank page. And I just want you to get your mind into a sort of soothing mindset. And we're going to work with a really super calming, soothing colour and just create some really abstract landscapes, all right? So rather than mixing a colour, I'm just using one of these little Daniel Smith dot cards for my painting today. And I've got some Amtheyst Genuine here, and then there's some Imperial Purple. These are really great little sort of samplers for just, dipping your toe into Daniel Smith paints. And if you don't have these, that's fine. And then what I've done is I've set myself up a little tilted board just because I'm going to work quite loosely and quite softly, and I want the paint to be able to sort of move down the page as I do that. So I'm going to start by just laying at the top of my page. I'm just going to lay down some purple and see what it does. So I've got this, I don't know why, but I've decided to go for a really big brush as well. So I've got a size 16 artist brush. This is a lovely brush to work with. It helps me to be loose and flowing. And I'm just going to get some water onto that amethyst, that nice deep sort of indigo purple. And that nice deep hue is going to work really well as a sort of moody winter skyline, hopefully. So let's just pop it down. My brush is still quite dry because I haven't used this one for a while. And I'm just going to put a fairly substantial amount of that amethyst colour right at the top of my page. This is just like half a sheet of watercolour paper, okay? So just half a A3 sheet, chopped up into a couple of little samples, just so I can have a play, have some fun. So just popping a good dollop of that at the top of the page. You really have to scrub these paints to get them going when they're dry. So I'm just doing that and then dolloping, okay? And then from there, I'm just going to add some water to that. So clean my brush, and then I'm just going to sort of tease it down just by wiggling my brush, and the pigments would sort of find its own way down here. And it's just enjoying that lovely, calming purple tone and encouraging it to sort of dilute. So it's a wash really as it moves down the page. I'm going to stop about there with that. If it dribbles, don't worry, you can always get your brush and lift back off. I'm just going to leave that paint to be paint and do what it does best, which is to kind of slowly but surely mush down the page, okay? And so then you're starting to see we're filling the space, and we're starting to get this sense of negative space in our landscape as well. So I'll have a go at this Imperial Purple just for a change, and I'm going to put in now, whilst that's drying, whoa, that's an umphier purple. It's quite nice though. Just going to put in a line here for my sort of horizon line. So really, really gently. And I'm going to sort of mix between those two purples here. So just sort of putting a little bit in and just letting my sort of imagination guide me a little bit here. And what I'm going to do is now, just with some water, I'm going to soften off the top and just it's interesting how the paint then works its way up instead of down, just by wetting. So just going to pop that in. So now we've got a little horizon line with a lovely space between. Getting a bit of a hard edge there, which I don't want. So just with some water, before it's totally dry, I'm going to give it one more zhuzh. See if I can get that to drop a little bit. And if because when you're painting in this way, you'll notice things as you go along. just, you know, let your intuition guide you here. There's no right or wrong. We're just playing with this idea of putting a landscape in and just keeping it really simple by focusing on those core colours that we had sort of going on from the start here, really. Let's try and put, oh no, let's not go into another colour really, that's a silly idea. So already there you've got a really, really simple sort of pared back landscape. You know, you can just chuck a bit more paint in, see what that does. I can see it wants to dribble. I'm trying to avoid it dribbling, but I'm also trying to encourage it to soften, to sort of split, to spread, and to sort of occupy that space, and that space between the sort of spaces, I suppose. And then you could, I suppose, just take a really light bit of paint again, something really, really watered down, and just sort of pull it side to side. I do feel calmer doing this. I just squished my finger in something a minute ago, and it's just sort of thinking about those sort of bare, snowy landscapes, isn't it? And I suppose this purple here just sort of acts as a little shadow tone. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's like snow, and it's sort of holding my brush really far down and just pulling across to sort of make some marks on that landscape. And just be really playful and experimental here with the way that you're working with this. Just going to pause for a minute because I think I could do with just one more tone of purple. I'm also going to get just a bit of white gouache, so we can add to that a little bit. But it's just essentially trying to tell you that a landscape can be so simple. It can be so hacked back, so pared back. It doesn't have to be perfectly structured, perfectly drawn. It's sort of just observing the shapes and the spaces between the shapes, and just working with one colour and just seeing what comes from that. So I'm so often sort of feel that I need to show you how to draw things and how to paint things accurately. But sometimes it's nice to just leave space for the imagination to sort of take you on a little journey of your own. And I just wanted to finish off this cycle just with that lovely grounded sort of thought and approach. Nothing too technical, nothing too stressful, and trying to use this sort of approach to landscapes to find peace and calm, which I think is very much needed right now. So I've used exactly the same colour there throughout so far. I've used mostly just the Amtheyst purple, which I already had, and I just thought I want to get some definition into this sort of skyline bit. So I'm gonna, it's still quite soft here. I'm going to soften it off a little bit more. And I'm just going to drop, I've just got some shadow violet here just out of shot. I'm just going to be bold, and I'm going to drop some into the top, just for a sort of different little sort of change of tone there. It's a really granulated paint, the shadow violet, so it will move nice and easily, and sort of just sort of getting it on your brush, pushing upwards, and sort of trying to create the sense of a sort of horizon line, I suppose, without over-egging the custard too much. And it's interesting how these paints sort of shift and change, and they move the other paints around. You might have noticed that already happening here. So I'm going to go a bit more here. I'm just literally dabbing the paint here, just dabbing it, and interrupting a little bit that sort of heavy line with a bit more of this sort of lovely shadow tone. So be playful here, and you can sort of, you know, the tips of your brush are sort of kind of poke out the edge and sort of create almost like a sort of forest maybe, I don't know. I want you to be thinking about that blank page which is on the other side, and what, you know, what appears in your mind, what would you do? if you were me right now. And I'm just going to let this little bit of paint that sort of wants to go onto the main bit of my, also the sort of lower part of my painting, I'm just going to let it out as it's looking like it wants to poke over the edge, and just keep playing with dropping the paint in and seeing what it does. You can do this with ink as well. I don't see why you couldn't do it with ink. I'm playing with these paints just because I like working with them, and I just wanted something to soothe my soul, my lovelies. Something just gentle to soothe my soul. Do you know what I mean? So hence chucking this in. I hadn't planned to do this at all, but I was having a look at some little ideas in a book, and I was like, yeah, actually, that's a nice little inroad for them into a really, really simple landscape. So just keep chucking it in and just noticing. Then we're just going to let that area dry, and then obviously you can play around a little bit with some of the stuff that we explored before here. So I've got a little bit of white gouache every time. Just going to get a bit of that on the end of my brush, and just going to give that a little bit of a flick, make a bit of a starry sky. This is just, you know, just gentle contemplation, having a bit of fun, letting the sort of inner child out a little bit. Try not to trash my brush too much with this, but there you go. Just doing a little bit of flicking, adding a few stars to my sky, and just sort of seeing what emerges, what comes from this super simple structure, I suppose, and thinking about the space between, and very simply tackling that blank page. You know I'm going to get carried away with this, don't you? Yeah. You know, how do we tackle that blank page fear? Can we just move towards it nice and calmly and actually be playful with them? And then I remembered I've got a little bit of stardust. That's going to be my sort of finishing touch, is just to pop a bit of water on there, give it a minute just to soften. And then I'm going to pull a bit of that stardust into my foreground and maybe even flick a bit. I was going to say on the ceiling, but you know I mean sky, don't you, when I say ceiling? I'll pop a bit on the ceiling and maybe a bit on the floor. Yeah, I don't know. So just getting that stardust going. It needs a lot more water. We have got these as individuals now on the shop. We've also got Tibet Gold on the shop, just like where we got a bit over enthusiastic. So you can get them as little individual units. And it's a good way if you want to try these fine tip colours just to have a play. So because there's not really any colour to it, I can just sort of plop it on, and I'll tilt it in a minute so you can see my very high-tech table that I've made myself. It's really funny, this filming malarkey sometimes. Just out of shot. Nikki's paper cutter holding up my little board for me, and just popping some little sparkles in there. Why on earth not? Hey, why on earth not? And just still trying to stay quite soft. And I'm really tempted to sort of see if I can flick a bit of glitter into the top bit as well. Should I do it? Yeah. So I'm going to just flick it. And again, we won't know. Something's definitely flicking. Not sure if there's more of it going on my face. We don't really know until I tilt it, whether or not that's been successful. But we shall see. I'll try and get you some photos of that. And, you know, can that be enough for a simple exploration of the space between? Can that just be enough? Can we let that be enough? Hopefully. I hope you're not all there thinking, no, I want more, Ellie. No, it's not enough at all. Just keeping it really simple, a little bit like the last study, but this one just a bit more pared back and much more about just being calm and exploratory and sticking within a limited palette. I just used purple there. I used Amtheyst and I used Shadow Violet, and that was about it really. You could have mixed in maybe one more like the Cobalt Violet or something like that, but I think that is enough. And then just a bit of masking fluid and just a nice big brush, just because it's gestural and it's nice. But, you know, any brush will do. But try and think about holding it sort of here instead of gripping it all tight here. Yeah, just have it there and get some movement, some looseness into the wrist. And I hope you've just enjoyed my little painted meditation today. All right, I shall see you next cycle. Thank you so much. Enjoy.